Hey, friends, and welcome back to another episode of Beyond Beauty with Stephanie. Today's guest is someone I have come to admire deeply, not just for the work she does, but for the heart she carries. Holly is the founder of Autism Meets Faith, a nonprofit ministry that supports families navigating the journey of autism through the lens of faith. Her story began with unimaginable heartbreak, loss, and ultimately healing. We'll talk about growing up in poverty, the moment she gave birth to twins and lost one, how her daughter Faith came into this world, and how her family is now being used by God to help others through their journey. This is a powerful story of redemption, grief, hope, and most of all, faith. So grab a tissue and let's dive in. So, Holly, I'm so excited to have you on today. It is truly an honor to share your story and to shine a light on the incredible work you're doing through your nonprofit organization, Autism Meets Faith. For those who may not know, Autism Meets Faith is a dedicated support for families and children with autism by blending faith, encouragement, and community, and helping parents know that they're not walking this journey alone. I really believe that everything we go through, starting from the moment we're born, shapes us and prepares us for the path that God has for us. So let's start at the beginning. Holly, can you tell me a little bit about your childhood and how those early experiences helped shape you into the woman that you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. What happens in our childhood really does shape the decisions that we make as adults. When I look at my childhood, I kind of break it up into two sections. I was born in Texas, but then we moved to Florida and we lived there for 8 years. I picture my early childhood in Florida and then my later childhood back in Texas. When we were in Florida, it was very much the typical mom was in the PTA. We were very involved with the community. We were in Girl Scouts. We took ice skating lessons. We played softball for a few years. It was just everything that you would expect. And we were at the beach all the time. It was a very active childhood. The only thing that I can say back then is that my parents were divorced. So I don't actually have any memories of my dad living with us. It was
Mhm.
always him in his apartment in Tampa and us down in the house in Sarasota. Looking back now, I can probably see where the signs were where my parents definitely struggled with money. For example, all my mom's friends were our friends' parents. So every activity was centered around us kids. But I remember going to the local churches to the food banks where our parents would pick out groceries. We didn't think anything of it, right? We didn't think, oh, we're poor, so we have to go to church.
Yeah.
It was actually a fun day for us because our parents would go in and get the food. We were just playing with each other. We didn't see it like that. However, when we moved back to Texas, it kind of all changed. I look at it now as based on who my mom was surrounding herself with affected us. In Florida, like I said, all of her friends had kids our ages and we were in Girl Scouts together. But when we moved back to Texas, all her friends were the ones she had before we moved to Florida, all had adult kids. So she no longer, she wasn't in the PTA. She didn't sign us for any extracurriculars. Her weekends now became going to the bar with her friends. We were at home by ourselves a lot more. And that's actually when we started to see, oh, like we are poor at this point because that's when my mom really started talking to us about money and started making us ask our dad for money. She'd be like, call your dad and tell him we need more money. We got to the point where we didn't want to because we didn't want our conversations with our dad to be centered on asking him for money. And so it was up to the point where it became normal to come home from school and the electricity was out. Or for my mom to say, I don't get paid till Friday, but the water's going to shut off on Tuesday. So I need y'all to go fill up the bathtub so we can flush the toilets.
And how old were you at this point, like roughly?
Moved back when I was 10,
Okay.
from 10 up. And really, it was the early years before, because I guess my dad was upset that my mom moved us away out of state and child support wasn't automatic back then. It was where the parents still paid each other. So that's why it became a real struggle. And that's where my mom started saying, oh, we don't have money for that. With me and my husband now, we never tell our kids we don't have money for something. That doesn't mean we're avoiding it, right? We teach them that if there's something you want, you have faith for it. And then also when you're wanting something You need to look at the value because they're like, oh, mommy, I want this or that. I'm like, okay, well, you have your allowance money. You're welcome to buy that. And then they're like, oh, wait.
It's a
So
different story with having to buy it with their own money.
absolutely. So we use it to teach them, okay, is the value you're going to get from that what you want to spend on it? Or is it in your budget? Or do you need to believe God for a little while? They never hear us say, we can't afford that. It was something I heard growing up all the time. I think it helps my perspective when I'm dealing with families now with Autism Meets Faith. We went through the food stamps, electricity being cut off. And families today, when electricity is cut off, you
Right.
pay your bill and it's back on within an hour. Back
Yeah.
then, they had to come out. So you could pay your bill and then be like, okay, you're in queue. It'll be 2 to 4 days before your power's back on. It gave me perspective and empathy when I'm dealing with parents today that are really struggling. I understand the struggle and how to give that hope that there are better times.
So coming into your teenage years, what did that look like and like a young adult?
Teenage years it was still a continued struggle. And I used to get into trouble a lot because my mom was always out.
When we don't have guidance, that's bound to happen, right?
And we didn't have Christ in our life. My mom believed in Jesus and she says she took us to church. But then I'll tell her, Mom, if I don't remember it, does it count? So it became where we just went on Christmas Eve or Easter. But then my mom also was one of those moms who would introduce us to tarot cards and Ouija boards. So it was just very confusion. And like you said, no guidance. Also, because I had older sisters and one of them was an adult, she would pay us to babysit her daughter while she went out. But that also meant she was letting us drink and we had a lot of access to alcohol. So
Yeah.
it was just a lot of negative influences. When I look back, I'm like, wow, God really protected me in a lot of these situations because in Houston, they have clubs. I don't know if you even know, there's a club called Numbers. And on Fridays, it's all ages night.
My kids called me one night. They were in Houston and we're all under 21. I'm like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we're at a bar. And I'm like, you are not funny. And they're like, no, Mom, like we're at a bar.
Uh-huh.
I'm Houston. I'm like, get home.
Yeah.
To be in a bar. And they're like, this is so cool. We can be in the bar. They put little wristbands on them and don't serve them alcohol. And, but it's like, what's so wild to me coming from Oregon? That's just so different.
We grew up, even though my mom said she believed in God, just not thinking that anything was wrong with that lifestyle. But then we moved to Tomball my junior year of high school. And it was, first of all, we moved there because we found an apartment complex that was income-based. Tomball was so different. And Tomball was much more like a lot of the area. It only had one high school at the time. The street we lived on was not developed. It had a few ranches and there was a whole field of cows. The school itself, they were very conservative. And that was just a big culture shock for me moving there. So at the time, I didn't really appreciate it. But then looking back now, I'm like, that's really the school and environment I would want my kids to be in.
Yeah.
So it was really, my teen was just the rebellious and transition. And I know about 3 times that I know God was trying to introduce himself to me through different people. And I wasn't open to it.
Yeah.
I just shot it down each time. But I'm just so glad that he didn't give up on me.
Okay. So we had a pre-interview before this, so I know your story. Let's fast forward to meeting your husband.
So Michael, he's actually from Nigeria and he's 15 years older than me. He went from Nigeria to England and from England to Pennsylvania, and he was living there. He started a church and became a pastor. That was always his life, Jesus. He was always a Christian, but he grew up Catholic in Nigeria because it's either you're Catholic or you're their old religious ways. And so he went to seminary and he was about to graduate, but his mom was like, no, I want you to have a family. So she took him out of that and then he became Christian. That's when he really developed his relationship with Jesus. Jesus led him to Pennsylvania. And then after a while, he started feeling God call him to move somewhere else. So he looked at 3 different states and moved to Texas. It's funny because when he moved here, he actually lived down the street from where I worked. We were always kind of in each other's radius, but we never met. until his sister got him a Match.com profile and filled it out for him. So after that, one of the girls that I worked with, she's like, "Oh, Holly, you should go on this website." I think she was using eHarmony or something. So I signed up for eHarmony, and you take like a questionnaire that's about 1,000,000 questions long. And at the end of it, I remember it saying that I was in the small percentage of people they cannot match. I ended up going on Match.com. I went on there and I wasn't finding anybody. But then all of a sudden, Michael messaged me. We ended up meeting that next day for lunch, and it was so easy to talk to him. Ended up spending the whole day together. And after that, like literally on our second date, we were getting pizza, and he's like, a ring would look really good on your finger. It was almost like we just knew this is going to end up in marriage.
Oh, I love that.
And it's actually him that I rededicated myself to Christ, because he was taking me to Lakewood Church at the time.
So I guess I was going to ask you at this point, when you met him, had you come to have a relationship with Christ? Had you found your faith, or where were you sitting at that?
I remember I told you there were points in my life when God tried to introduce himself to me. So that happened. I became friends with a girl who went to one of the Christian universities, I think SBU down in Houston. And she used to talk about Jesus, and she invited me to a few of her Bible studies. So I went. Then I went to another Starbucks, and the same thing. The girl there invited me to go to Lakewood's college night.
Okay.
So every time I moved to a different Starbucks, I would just meet a girl that would invite me, not directly to church, but to a Bible study or their little teen, college group. So I did that. So I hadn't given my life to Christ yet, but I was open to it. By the time I was with Michael and then knew that he was a pastor, and he wasn't currently pastoring a church when he moved to Houston, because he left another pastor in charge of the one in Harrisburg, and the intent was to come here and plant a church. So that's why he was going to Lakewood, and he took me to Lakewood. And it was during the altar call that I really felt like, yeah, it's time. I gave my life to Christ then. And it's just, I really just believe that all those little things led up to me being open, so that when I met Michael, and with Michael already being who he was and a man of God, he was able to bring me to it. Because, the Bible says, don't be unequally yoked.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point with Michael, I think he knew that I was on the path, and he could bring me along underneath him, because I was open to it. One thing just led to the next, and we're where we are today.
So I'd like to talk about motherhood, like becoming a mom, because that really is like the story behind Autism Meets Faith, right?
Yes, it is.
So let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny because really growing up, I did not want to have kids. I was big into art. I went to the Art Institute of Houston. My early degrees were in photography. My dream was to work for like National Geographic and travel the world. And I would just be like the aunt that popped into town every now and then. That all changed with Michael. When we met, it was just instantly like I knew, okay, we're going to have kids. My family couldn't wrap their heads around it, because even when I got pregnant with my first daughter, Isabel, my dad was like, but you're not a mom. He said, you're an aunt. So it was a lot of even pushback from my family, but it was just God working every step of the way, because we had Isabel, and then the next pregnancy was Angelina, which was the twins. And then after that was Faith, and then Judah. And I know we'll talk more about Angelina, because that one led into Faith, but becoming mom really was the greatest thing for me. When I became a mom is when I truly understood God's love, because he's our dad. And I think until someone is a parent, they don't fully understand that concept of how God can just unconditionally love all of us.
Okay, so let's talk about the twins and just the whole story with that.
Yeah, so at this point we had Isabel, and then I wanted a little boy. So she was only 9 months old when I got pregnant again. And I remember for some reason I just wanted twins. And so I would tell Michael, like, I was like, pray for twins, because I still felt like his prayers were more effective than mine. And I remember, when I found out I was pregnant, we went to the doctor. And at first They couldn't even tell a heartbeat. They're like, well, it's either too early or it's a miscarriage, but they had only were seeing one potential baby. So they did the blood work and we're like, okay, you'll come back and we'll check. Maybe you're just not far enough along. So we went back and I remember thinking, like, it's going to be twins, even though they had not said anything about seeing two embryos at the time. I just kept believing. I was like, no, we're going to have twins. We're going to have twins. And so when I went back for that next appointment, I remember the ultrasound. She was like, did we find two babies last time? I said, no. I was so excited. I was like, wow, this faith thing really works. I remember being very excited. And at that point, my husband was a CDL driver. So he was out on the road. It was really just me and Isabel a lot of the times. He would be gone like 2 weeks to 3 weeks, sometimes a month at a time before he came home. And for the most part, everything was fine. I did have at one point kidney stones during that pregnancy, which I didn't know that eating too many Tums for heartburn during pregnancy can give you kidney stone.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, apparently. So I went through that and I was huge. It was twins. And so
Yeah.
I was in pain a lot. And then I remember at one point, I was like, I don't feel one of the babies. And he's like, don't say that. He's like, the babies are fine. And like after he said that, there was like this big push in my stomach. He's like, see, there you go. But for some reason, in the back of my head, I still felt like something just wasn't right.
Your mother's intuition, right?
Right. Yeah. I remember I was just scheduled to go for one of my regular appointments, and we had already picked out the baby's names. We had already had the baby shower. And this is also why we believe in the power of what you name your child. Because Angelina was his mother's name, and it's like Queen of Angels. But then for the boy, I picked Tristan, not even caring about what it means. So the name Tristan actually means like wild one or sorrow. Like it's nothing good attached to it.
Okay.
And so I just liked the name and was going with it. And
Yeah.
so we got to the point where it was, I believe it was 36 weeks. So just shy of being full term. And I had just a regular appointment scheduled, and Michael was going back out on the road that morning. And my sister was coming to watch Isabel for me because I knew I was going to get the ultrasound. So everything was just a normal day. And so I went to the appointment, and then the ultrasound tech, you always know something's wrong because they get quiet, right?
Yeah.
So I was just sitting there like, what's going on? And then she asked me, she's like, have you felt movement? I said, yeah. And she's like, okay, but of course, if there's two babies, you're always going to feel movement, right? You can't discern which is which. And she kept looking and testing and looking and looking. And then at one point she finally says, I can't find a heartbeat for baby A. And baby A was Tristan, our son.
Yeah.
And she goes, I even looked at, there's no brain activity. There's nothing. She's like, I'm going to go get the doctor. And it took me a while to process. I was like,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you even process that your child is,
Right.
and this, like I said, this is after the baby shower, after everything. I mean, 36 weeks, twins can be born at you hear stories of them being born at 28 weeks and then they're in the NICU and then survive, right?
Yeah.
The 36 weeks is just 1 week shy of full term, because at 37 weeks, you're considered full term. And if the baby comes, they're not going to stop it, right?
Yeah.
And so the doctor came in. I remember thinking, like, what did I do? And he was looking. I was like, I even asked him, I was like, is it because I always sleep on that side, like the side the baby that he was on? He's like, no, it's nothing you did.
Yeah.
And so we went, they sent me to the hospital because they were like, okay, we're just going to deliver both of them because we don't know what happened. And so we want to get the other baby out. But my husband was on the road.
Oh.
So the doctor called him for me and talked to him. And this is really just where you see the power of God based on your personal relationship with him. For me, because I was still a new Christian and I wasn't really as strongly rooted, I wasn't reading the Bible. I hadn't reached that point where I was reading the Bible all the time. It was just kind of like new and a little bit here and there. So I felt completely alone. But then my husband, imagine he's getting the call from the doctor driving an 18-wheeler on his way to Dallas down 45. The doctor calls him to tell him one of the babies does not have a heartbeat, and we're sending your wife to the hospital so we can deliver them. He said in that moment, he pulled over and he said the peace of God just came on him. And that God told him, the son I'm giving you is a living son.
Mm.
So it was almost like God's promise, like, this isn't the end of it,
Yeah.
and I'm with you. And so my husband just instantly, he had peace about it. He didn't go into grief or depression or anything like that, which was good also because he was driving an 18-wheeler truck.
Right. Definitely.
And even the company that he was driving for, I'm not going to say their name. I don't want to
Yeah.
badmouth them, but he called them and told them the situation. They're like, it was basically one of those, okay, we're sorry for you, but if you don't deliver, you're not getting paid. You can't abandon your truck.
Oh, my.
So he still had to finish delivering that load and come back. So he didn't get back to me until that evening, like after the babies had been delivered. So it was just really hard for me, going home because they put Angelina in the NICU. And even when I went to see her the first time, I started crying. It was like I couldn't celebrate her because all I saw was that what wasn't there. And so we went through that whole process. Thankfully, at the time, my mom, she did kind of just step up a lot for me and handle things because we had to have a funeral for Tristan. I mean, he was a baby and the hospital was like, do you just want to turn him into us? And just that idea, I was like, no. I was like, I didn't even want him alone. My mom took care of everything. And it just so happened. And this is where I really saw God working. When he says that he plans out your steps in your life for you, there is my grandmother who died when I was a baby. I never met her. She and my grandfather had, old people, they'll buy their cemetery plots and plan for that. So it's not a burden for their family. Well, they also bought 5 plots because they had 5 kids. So my grandmother really wanted to be buried under a tree in the cemetery. She just liked that whole aesthetic and the idea of being buried under a tree. Well, to get those plots and be by the tree, there was a kid's plot. It's basically a half plot that only a child could fit there. And so they bought it, even though there was no reason to, right? She was just like, I just want the tree,
Yeah.
so we'll just buy it to have it. Well, fast forward 2 generations later, really 3rd generation, because it was Tristan. My mom's like, I don't know if you remember, but we have this plot. So everything just came together. We didn't have to pay for anything. We didn't have to plan all of that. It was just there and ready for him.
Where he just gives me goosebumps. Like, seriously.
It does. And so even just knowing his middle name was Alexander, and that's my grandfather's name. So he's actually buried next to my grandfather under the tree that they had no idea they were ever going to need, but God knew.
But God, yep. It's beautiful. I love that so much.
And it really was. So he just took care of it. And it did take me a long time to get over the grieving process. I think especially as Christians, at this point, I feel like I'm well developed as a Christian, like that I'm on the meat. And I think sometimes it's so easy to forget when we're at that advanced stage where we're getting the strong meat that we forget how hard it is for the Christians who are new. And we try and just get them to where we're at without them having the time to process and go through and build that relationship.
And I think a lot of times, I just posted something about this morning. It's like God uses the broken, and not that he can't people that haven't been through super hard things, but we are broken and he allows that to happen so that we can know what it's like to be in the trenches. You know what I mean? Like, how can you help if you don't really understand? And you might not understand 100% what they're going through, but just similar things like with me and my business, it's just like helping women and understanding what it's like to go through certain things. It just helps them receive too what you have to say because you have been there,
Yeah, absolutely. And it just makes you understand the process that's needed, that they have to process their emotions, and it's just knowing that God is there.
Relationship with him because we see how much he loves us in those moments. Because we always know that, we hear that, right? God loves you, Jesus loves you. Okay, sure. When you're in it, and you see what he does for you and you're like, wow, like I don't deserve this, or he does amazing things. And when you can actually see that and be a part of it, it's just so much more It's just so strong.
He supersedes everything on earth. Because if you think about like therapists, they'll tell you the stages of grief and what you need to go through.
Yeah.
But then for me, it wasn't those stages. I mean, I'm sure I went through them, but it was God that got me out of it, because
Yep.
it wasn't even until after, I don't know if Faith was born yet or was pregnant with her, but it was a good, I feel like 18 months before I got over the grief. And it was only God that did it, because I went to a women's church event and they had her name's Carrie Pomeroli. She's a comedian who's does the Christian circuit. So she did her comedy bit. And then at the end, she was kind of prophesizing and praying over the crowd. And I remember there were two things she said that stuck with me. One was, there's a woman in here struggling with infidelity. She said, no more. And in my head, I knew exactly who that was for. It wasn't for me, but it was for a woman that I met that night. But then the second was, there's someone suffering from grief tonight. It's gone. And instantly I felt it gone. Like I just started, it was just like a weight was lifted off of me. And I just started, I was so happy and crying on the way home, because I knew that was me. And I no longer felt, because grief is a spirit and it really does just overwhelm you. And it was just lifted in that moment. And I could think about Tristan and talk about him and not cry. It was just God working that whole way through it, even through my pregnancy with Faith. So
Yeah.
I met this woman. I had seen her a few times because she worked in the children's ministry. And it turns out that she had been trying to get pregnant, but she kept miscarrying. I didn't know any of this. We were just having a conversation. I was like, oh, do you have kids? And she's like, not yet. And for some reason, the way she said it, I knew it was a struggle for her. And so when Carrie Pomeroli spoke that over the crowd, I knew that word was for her. And I remember, even though I didn't know her, it was like God, he kept telling me to tell her, hey, that was for you. That word was for you. But I always chickened out because I wasn't at that point yet. But then finally, one day came months later, and she was sitting in the aisle in front of me for service. And, at the beginning of service, they're always like, okay, turn to your neighbor. So she turned and said, hey, do you remember that event when the lady spoke? I said, God said that was for you. And I didn't know her story. I had just met her that night. She instantly started crying and then walked out. The next Sunday, her husband found me. He said that it's something we have been struggling with. Apparently, after that event, she had gotten pregnant but miscarried again. But then after I told her that, within a few months, she was pregnant. And she now has 2 kids.
Oh, that's so amazing. It's amazing how God uses us for each other, to help each other. And even like you said, months later, it probably meant more to her that it was all that time later.
And it was just also how God, like when he gives you an assignment, if he really needs you to, you're going to do it.
I chicken out a lot. I'm getting better about it, but it's hard.
Too, because I'm an introvert, and a lot of people don't think that now, like because of the role that I have with Anna, but it's almost like I'm forced to talk to people, but it's not my nature.
Same girl. People always say, you are not an introvert. I would have never guessed. And I'm like, oh, you have no idea. So let's go next and we'll talk about Faith.
Yes.
Let's get into that.
So Faith, she was a surprise in every way. I was still grieving when I got pregnant with her. I was looking to replace Tristan, right, to get him back. So I remember at this point going to the doctor for the anatomy scan. So 2 things happened. We were kind of struggling a little bit financially at this point because I was a stay-at-home mom and it was just Michael trucking, which is one thing that I didn't even mention after Angelina. So after Angelina was born, because Michael was still trucking, he had to go right back out on the road. So my mom came and stayed with us, and my mom prepared us all this food, and we ended up all getting food poisoning. I guess she didn't cook the meat all the way or whatever happened, but we were just all sick. And so my mom left, and it was just me and the babies. And Michael was scheduled to be back that night, but he's on the road, so things kept happening, delaying him getting back home to me. So that night, I basically, because babies eat every 2 hours, but because she was a preemie, I had to pump to feed her the bottle. I would wake up, I would feed her the bottle that I had pumped 2 hours before, get her back to bed, then go throw up because I was suffering from food poisoning. and then pump again. So I repeated that every 2 hours all through the night. By the time my husband came home, he just really felt the spirit of like sickness in that house. And he went and looked at Isabel, and Isabel, nothing was staying in her. Specifically, God told him, if you leave your family again, you will not have a family to come home to. So he quit the job. That led to financial issues, obviously, because he was looking for jobs that he could just be in the city, but it meant he wasn't making quite as much.
Okay, that's super powerful. I feel like, is that to just quit your job, when you are the sole provider, but when when God's telling you something and you hear him clearly, like you listen, right?
He did. He listened, and he knew. He said, "No job is worth my family." But I think that's also about the strength of a couple. First of all, you see couples break up after the death of a baby because they just can't get past it. Then when you quit a job and now you're struggling, couples break up from that.
Yeah.
Right. So during that process, he quit the job. We got evicted from our rental.
Mhm.
And at that time, we barely had any money left, and we had no idea what we were going to do because we were in the process of getting evicted. We knew it was coming. And we're like, how are we going to get another place to live? Angelina was born in September. This is all happening in October, literally like the next month. It's not even a breather time. The attacks kept coming. So our reprieve was, in Nigerian culture, they don't do baby showers. They just come and visit you and the baby, and they put money in the baby's hand, right? So his sister's fiance came and visited us, and he was a psychiatrist. He was pretty wealthy, and he gave us $200. And I remember before he came, because I knew he was going to give us money because of the baby. I said, if he could just give us $200. And I had no reason to think $200. Like, our rent was not $200.
Right.
So that's what he gave. And we couldn't find anything. And then we ended up fighting in the car, and the babies were crying. And I was like, okay, well, you just go home with the kids. I will find us a place to live. I found this one apartment. They were running a special, move in for $200, pay nothing till January.
Oh, wow.
So we moved in for $200 and paid nothing till January. And $200 is all we had. So it's just like God was just taking every step of the way. And then after we moved in, car got repoed. So Michael was carrying a duffel bag to the grocery store to buy his groceries. But then he got a job with this one company. He had met this guy out on the road, another trucker, and he said, the guy said, if you're going to continue to do this, you're going to work for this company. The company was Sigma. And he gave Michael the full Bible on CD. Michael would listen to that. Michael applied with Sigma and got the job with them. And it was local. So he was home every day.
Nice.
He was making so much more money. By January, everything turned around. And by the following year, we were able to move out of that apartment and move into the house. And that's when I was pregnant with Faith.
I love that.
And so I said all of that so you can fully understand like how bad it got for us.
Yeah.
And then where God's led us. So I'm at the point now, I'm pregnant with Faith, but I still haven't reached the point where I went to the church and got over my grief fully. I would say I was, but I wasn't.
Yeah. You were healing.
Yeah. So we go for the scan at 28 weeks, and they asked me, they said, did you do the genetic scanning? I said, no. And then I was like, why is she asking me this? And it turned out they were like, well, there's some soft markers for Down syndrome. I didn't even know what that was. I knew what Down syndrome was and stuff, but I was like, what's a soft marker and all this? So they started explaining to me. They just said one of her kidneys had too much fluid, and then also the bridge of her nose was very short. And so the doctor started telling me that they could do the amnio. And so we went through that process. And finally, the day of the amnio, she was like, if she has Down syndrome, are you going to abort? And I said, well, no, we're not going to do that. And she said, okay, we have this other option that's safer for the baby. And apparently it was a new test where they could just test the mother's blood and it would tell the genetics of the baby. But it was going to take 2 weeks to get the results. So we went ahead and did that. We did the blood test. And in that 2 weeks, my husband was a partner with Kenneth Copeland Ministries. And Kenneth Copeland had taken his Bible with all his personal notes and duplicated it for all his partners and sent it for free.
Oh.
In his notes, in the beginning of it had basically like, it was almost like a study Bible. So you could look up all the faith scriptures and it would tell you where to go and it would connect scriptures, which is big for a new Christian.
Yeah.
So during that 2 weeks, I just kept praying that the test came back fine. There was nothing wrong with her. And I just devoured that Bible and faith scriptures for that 2 weeks. And finally I got to the point I said, God, if everything is fine, I'm going to name her Faith because you've taught me to have faith with her.
Yeah.
And then after that 2 weeks, they said, okay, she doesn't have Down syndrome. Everything's fine. The kidneys are looking good. And they just chopped up the short nose bridge because her dad is from Africa. That some, African Americans can have that shorter nose bridge. So I was like, perfect, great. And, we continued on with the pregnancy. God just walked me through it. And I remember my husband saying, she's fine. He was just all praises. He was like, praise Jesus for another little baby girl. I processed through it. And I had that moment that event where the grief went away and I got to the end of the pregnancy and I was still believing to have a vaginal birth. I had found one doctor in the whole city who was willing to let me try. It's called a VBAC, a vaginal birth after C-section. However, it got to the point where Faith just was not turning. She was breech. And really, Isabel was breech. That's what had started me having C-sections. But I kept praying. I was like, no, she's going to turn. But then I tried to take it into my own hands. So I found out that chiropractors have a technique that they can use for alignments to kind of encourage the baby to turn. So I went to the chiropractor and she gave me these little NSAID things. They're basically one side is sticky and you put it on your pinky toe and then you burn it. And the smoke is supposed to somehow make the baby like turn.
Okay.
So I know you're like, what?
Or I'm like, that's wild.
But I was so in the point, I was like, I'm going to do anything because I just wanted her to turn.
I could understand that.
So I remember coming home and doing it. And Michael looked at me, he said, what are you doing? And it was one of those moments where like a husband just has to let his wife figure it out. He was like, just don't burn your toes. And so I did it. But then when I was sitting there, God specifically, it was like he came to me and he said, what are you doing? He said, won't you just trust me? And then he led me to a scripture. And after that, so I never went to the chiropractor again. I threw away all those little incense thingies. Now, it took a long time because every time I went to the doctor, she was still breech. And it got to the point where I was 40 weeks pregnant and she was still breech. And every time I went, the doctor would give me like the minuscule percentage that she would turn. And then even so, the doctor was like, look, I cannot allow you to have a breech baby as a VBAC. She said, there are too many complications that can happen. We're just not going to do it. I said, okay, let's just wait. I said, she's going to turn. She's going to turn. So finally at 40 weeks, I was having so much pain. I thought I was going into labor. Well, I had my appointment that week after this pain. Well, the pain went away. So I went to my normal appointment and she had turned, my 40-week-old baby turning. So at this point, the doctor's like, okay, we can continue on with the plan. But then we're approaching 42 weeks. And my doctor's like, you cannot be pregnant forever. We're going to have to induce. And the thing with when you induce, they can't give you the drugs for it because I've already had C-sections and the drugs are too much on the uterus that can make it rupture. So they use like a balloon thing that they insert and inflate, and that's supposed to encourage your body to dilate. Well, that stopped at about 3 or 5 centimeters. Labor stopped progressing, and then her heart rate started slowing down, like every time I got a contraction. So finally in the morning, they're like, we just have to deliver you C-section. And I remember crying, going into operating room. I think I was just overwhelmed with everything and that it wasn't happening the way I thought it was going to happen.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I remember the anesthesiologist, she looked at me, she said, you have to stop crying or I'm going to have to put you out. So it immediately, like I stopped. So we had her and it turned out she was a 10-pound baby.
Oh, goodness gracious.
Yeah. And the doctor was like, aren't you glad you didn't? But so everything came out fine. She ended up, being fine, even though nothing had happened how I thought it would. But it was truly just every step of the way, God showing how powerful to have faith in him.
Yeah.
And then it just started the journey of who Faith is. And so, leading into what we started because of her that became Autism Meets Faith. She was a very active child. I remember one guy at church, he saw her, she's like, that's going to be the one you have to watch out for. She's going to be a handful. And she was until Judah was born. And then it's almost like, because at this point, Faith was 2, it's almost like just something switched and she was no longer outgoing. And I thought it was just because Judah, right? She was fine until he started moving, like being mobile. But then she became very clingy. And this was also at the age of 2. By the time she was 3, it was really like just completely, I mean, her behaviors and everything just completely changed. And then leading up until her 4-year well visit, when the doctor was like, okay, something more is going on. And that started the process of getting her evaluated for autism.
So she was about 3 when this happened.
Yeah. 4 is when the doctor was like, okay, something's changed. Because, when you go to the doctor for your child's well checks, every year they make you fill out a questionnaire like on their development. Well, apparently for her 3-year, I had said she could ride a bike and do all these other things. But at 4-year, I had said, no, she couldn't do these. So it was showing a regression that I didn't even realize was there. And that's also how I realized how powerful it is to have your child be with a stable doctor, a doctor that's getting history and watching development and asking questions. Because we ended up getting her evaluated, because we definitely saw behavior changes, and certain things would set her off and we didn't know. She was not, I mean, it was almost like she thought her dad was the boogeyman or something, because she just clung to me for everything. She didn't want anybody else around her. So we ended up taking her to a clinic to get evaluated. And at this point, I had gotten on the wait list to get her evaluated with Texas Children's, but that wait list was a year long.
Oh, goodness.
So the doctor's like, okay, there's this new clinic open. You can take her there. So I took her there and they did their evaluation. It was more like just playing. They didn't really ask me a lot of questions. They just played with her, and that was their evaluation. And they said, okay, we don't think she has it. I was like, okay. However, a year later, Texas Children called me and said, hey, it's your turn for her to come be evaluated. I remember calling my husband and I said, do we want to get her evaluated again? And he said, absolutely. He said, why wouldn't we? And that kind of surprised me.
And you knew, I mean, at this point, like, okay, you're a mom, we know, like we said earlier, it's like that instinct. We know you knew it wasn't right.
Yeah.
Yeah. You just didn't want to face it necessarily, but you knew probably deep down, like you probably knew too,
Yeah, absolutely. So we went and I took her and we got her evaluated, and their evaluation was so thorough and so much more than what it was at the other place. And it took so much longer because it was so thorough. And then even afterwards, immediately they gave me their results. They didn't send you to the doctor, wait, like a social worker immediately came in. She gave me resources for next steps. She told me what to do in the school system, and just completely set Faith up for getting the proper care. And I remember my husband saying, why would we have denied her that? Like, for parents, we want to avoid it or sweep it under the rug, but really it's doing a disservice for the child that's not getting her the resources she needs. At the time, God told my husband, he said, there's nothing wrong with your daughter. She just thinks differently, but you're going to use this as a platform to help other people. And this was even a year before we even started AMF, Autism Meets Faith. That started just from, 1, the word that God had spoken, but then 2, because during that year, I got her in all the therapies that were recommended for. And one of them was occupational therapy. And I remember sharing all the resources that I found for her, like getting a free iPad to help her with development. There's different resources and things to put in place at school for her because she was in pre-K. And I remember her therapist asking, hey, can I write these down? Because I have parents with other clients of mine whose kids are autistic, but I don't know all of this. I remember telling my husband how even Faith's therapist was asking for the resources that I had found. And he said, right then, he said, we're going to start a charity. He said, other people need to know this. And that's how it started. Originally, we just thought we were going to be like resources. We didn't know it was going to grow into what it is now. We just thought we were going to, everything that we learned, we would put it out and help parents that way.
So what does Autism Meets Faith look like today? What kind of support do you provide for families?
It still amazes me. Just even today, this morning, I was just thinking about how much we've grown. On our website, we have like a blog where it's resources on potty training, next steps. One of our board members, who's a therapist, she created a resource guide for the greater Houston area. And any information they need, from summer camps to school to federal waivers, it's all in there for them. So
Yeah.
we give them the basic resources, which is what originally we thought we were going to do. However, we go beyond that. We now offer a scholarship to help parents pay for therapy. And it's one of those situations where you're very thankful for programs like Medicaid, because a lot of them, because they are so low income, they're getting Medicaid to pay for their child's therapy. But then there's those parents that are making just above the limit, right?
Yes, that is a real thing.
And that's the one that we really make the impact with, because they're just above the limit for Medicaid. So they're on insurance. But the copays for some of these therapies, like ABA therapy, it's massive. So we were able to start offering therapy scholarships where they can apply once a year, and we pay it directly to the center. And one thing I'm kind of proud about that is, when I say therapy, I've paid for music therapy, we've paid for swim lessons, equine therapy. So anything that's really benefiting the child in some way. And then the thing we actually started out with, our first giveaway, was our toy giveaway at Christmas time. So we did our first toy giveaway, and we partnered with Toys for Tots. And that was our very first giveaway, is actually helping parents with Christmas time. Now we're 4 years later, and our toy giveaway has turned into something where we're giving toys to over 200 kids a year, having a party during it, because the kids are coming with their parents because they can't find childcare. So the kids get to enjoy the Christmas party in an atmosphere where nobody's going to look at them because they're screaming or because they're overwhelmed. We're just very understanding and open with them while the parent gets to go pick out the Christmas toys. And that one is really dear to my heart, because growing up the way we did, there were so many Christmases where my mom didn't even tell us at the time, where the church paid, like, gave us toys, that we only had a Christmas because the church donated toys. And then also I remember when Faith was going through therapy in January, we were going to her therapy, and I remember asking, because when you go, your appointments at the same time all the time, so you see the same families and the same kid. And I asked the lady at the desk, I was like, why is it so quiet? And she goes, oh, January and February are like that because everyone's copays are due, like their yearly deductible, where they have to pay $500. So they skip it because obviously they just pay for Christmas, right?
Right.
So I was like, wow, these kids need this. They need this routine and this structure, and they're having to miss out because their parents can't pay for it after dealing with paying for the holidays. So that's why the Christmas toy giveaway became so important to me.
Right. Lifting a burden for them. Yeah. That's amazing.
And that's really our biggest event of the year. We expanded to include more hands-on kids programs, because we got a brick and mortar. And so we have our Explorers Club and our Tech Art Club.
Yeah.
And the great thing I love, that even as we expand, we only expand in a capacity that we can afford to still offer the programs for free. So families do not have to pay for any of the programs. So this summer program that we just went through, thank God we got approved for a grant from the city, and it paid for it. So we had 53 kids sign up. Consistently, we had 20 show up every week, where they came in person and we had activities. And then every Saturday we took them on a field trip around the city, and that was all free for them.
That's awesome.
It's just grown into all these beyond just resources that you see on a computer, right?
Families that are going through the same things that they can relate with and talk to and become friends with. And I think that's just wonderful.
Yeah. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, these families, I know them. Like, when I think of a name or see it on the paper, I know exactly who it is. These families have my cell phone number. How many nonprofits can say some of their families that they're serving have their cell phone number?
Right.
Like, it's personal for us. We're very involved with these people. We know their stories. When I go and speak to donors or sponsors, like, we have one company, I met them through Toys for Tots, CRT Services. They're based here in Humble. They work in like gas and measurement. They've sponsored our Christmas party for the last 2 years. And so when I go and talk to them, I actually know these families, so I can share the stories with them. And it really makes them feel connected. I mean, they actually, last year, they adopted 10 families. The families got to submit their Christmas wish list, and their company prayed over every single family that they bought toys for. So it's personal. It's not just a name that we're serving. It's personal relationships.
When I met you and you talked about your organization, I was just like, this is so cool. Cause I've told you before, my sister was a foster mom to an autistic little girl. And, it's a lot of work. And I just watched her go through all that just to give, if she would have had something like what you have, it would have been so much easier for her. She had to do a lot of that on her and she struggled with that kind of stuff. So it's wonderful what you're doing for families. And I think like if there were a mom and dad listening right now who just received the diagnosis, right, for their child, what would you say to them? And also, if parents want to connect with you and find the support, what's the best way for them to plug into Autism Meets Faith?
Absolutely. So the best way is to start on our website. It's autismmeetsfaith.org. There's tons of resources on it just for them to get basic information. But then at the bottom, it says get connected so they can register their child with us so that every time we have a new program or something that we're doing, they're getting notified about it. And then also they can find us on social media. And that's where we post a lot of stuff, especially because throughout the year, I'm constantly applying for donations, and I apply for donations from grocery stores for food gift cards. And so every time I get those, the families that are like plugged in with us are the first ones I reach out to, like, hey, do you need help with groceries this month? And I send them the gift card, autismmeetsfaith.org. For the parents that are just getting the diagnosis, one, breathe, process it, really think about, let it soak in that, okay, my life is about to change, but it doesn't mean it's changing for the worse. It's just changing. And that was a big step, is learning how not only to deal with being a parent, but being a parent of a special needs child. The first thing is there's no shame in it. And that really came from God with us, is that, hey, there's no shame. This is what you're going through. I've trusted you to raise her. I've trusted you with her, and I've trusted you to help other people because of her. And so for parents, it's one, don't be ashamed to let people know that you're dealing with a special needs child, that your child has autism. You are their advocate. Because I got to tell you, as soon as we started advocating for Faith and I started getting her therapies and I started letting the school know and we got her the accommodations and resources, she has blossomed. She is such a different child now because we were not afraid to say, hey, we want these services for her. We weren't trying to push it under the rug or hide it from people. So don't let that mentality keep you from advocating and helping your child. Be the person that God has called you to be for your child, because you are the steward. I remember one time we pray for our children every day before we go to school, right? And I remember I dropped my kids off, and every time I drop them off, I say, Lord, protect them. And one day he finally said to me, he said, Holly, they are my children too. It was almost like he needed to remind me, like, I don't have to have that fear of everything that's going on and, for their safety at school. He said, they are my children too. I love them just as much as you do.
Yeah.
And that's how he is even with our children that have special needs. He loves them. Yeah, sometimes it's difficult. Some parents deal with it in such a way, their child's nonverbal, their child has aggressive behaviors, or they're elopers, and it seems very just intense and hard. Those are really the parents who don't have the time to find the resources because they're so just wrapped up in keeping their child safe. And those are the ones that we were like, okay, we're going to come alongside you. We're going to provide these resources. And even when we do our in-person events, we have some kids, they come, but like the first day we had the Explorers Club in the summer program, one of the girls, everything was fine. And then just out of nowhere, she threw her wooden birdhouse across the room.
Yeah.
Now, thank God it didn't hit any of the other kids, but we were understanding, right? We need to be a little more aware that this can happen. We put another volunteer around her. We want families to know we can work with you, and people are there that will work with you, and God will guide you to it. But you have to be willing to say, yes, my child is different, but it doesn't mean they deserve less.
Well, and probably with some parents, there's some parents, just people in general, that they get overwhelmed with things easy. And now they've got this diagnosis and it's like trying to find all the resources and just they start looking and it's like, this is too much, and they stop. So they never get to that step. So just having you to be alongside them, to take their hand essentially and say, we're going to help you, and just start that process. And you probably see a lot of these type parents flourishing after that and being able to start finding, they just need a little bit of help getting
Yeah.
there.
Yes. And that's why we also we have our moms group. And like you said, when we do our in-person events, because we actually ask the whole family to come. We're not like a clinic or camp where it's just for the special needs child. We ask the whole family to come. One, because the parents get to connect with each other. Two, because we believe in building up the whole family. Like if you
Yeah.
can extend that understanding in the home, then it's going to extend to the community. So the parents get to talk to each other, but we also encourage them. As the power of social media now, we have our Autism Meets Faith community group on Facebook, but there's also other ones, and I don't even mind saying it. There's like an even larger one, Autism Moms of Houston. They started out as just on social media. Now they serve more the south side and we're more the north side. Parents, get on there, get on social media, join these groups, because
Yeah.
you can ask a question and then all the moms will be like, oh, this works for me. Oh, I found this one. And it's
Yeah.
just about sharing resources. I mean, you're on Facebook anyway. Why not join the special needs group?
I think it's great. There's a lot of resources in this area too, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah.
So when you look back at everything you've walked through, poverty, loss, grief, and now leading a nonprofit, what would you tell your younger self if you were sitting across from her?
I would say be who you are, because I grew up very self conscious. A lot of things that I wanted to do, I didn't do, just because, I was always the chubby kid and, I would get picked on for it and never had boyfriends or anything like that. And so I was always just self conscious and I would just never felt like I could do what I wanted to do. I just never had that self esteem to do it. But now with Autism Meets Faith, I mentioned it to you, like, I have to be out there. It doesn't matter what I look like. It doesn't matter what my pant size is. Like, families need help and God is using me and
Well,
I'm honoring that.
do it. Just do it.
And I think it's just having supportive people around you. Like you, I mean, you donate a free facial to a mom raising a kid with autism every month through us. And the moms always talk about how just having a conversation with you was very almost like a therapy session. So it's very much the people that you surround yourself with. Don't
Yeah.
surround yourself with people that are going to put you down or negative. Surround yourself with people who are uplifting and who just unapologetically stay to their purpose.
Exactly. Yeah. I think that's super, super important. What's your vision? Like, what is the vision that maybe God has placed on your heart for the future for this organization?
I really see us being a household name the way Autism Speaks is.
Mhm.
And more so because when I look at our families, just the fact that we have faith in our name, most of these families are Christian based. So I see us going into and helping churches and families balance their Christian faith with having a child with special needs. Because that's a huge question we get all the time is, hey, what churches do you have that have a special needs ministry? Because we've met parents who their church has been like, we can't handle your kids. So they stop going to church.
Even the schools, I mean, there's in special ed, like, you need training for that. And I think it does take a special person to do that.
Absolutely. And it's really our goal. My husband went ahead and started an LLC, Veracity Solutions, to help other nonprofits develop who they are, but also help current nonprofits develop their programs. And we always add in that special needs ministry. Like if they're working in something with kids, we're like, okay, are you prepared for working with special needs kids? And so we're doing it on both fronts, right? But then even just within Autism Meets Faith, our current vision is actually getting an RV that we can work in two different ways. So we want it to where we kind of gut the center of it and turn it into like a sensory bus.
Mhm.
So that around the city, where instead of just being in one place where people have to come to us, we can go to different events in different areas around the city and be that inclusive part for the event.
Yeah.
Kids with special needs can come in and they can play, they can do a sensory tables, or they can just kind of relax when they're at a community event but overwhelmed. Yeah. And even beyond that, so because a lot of times you see like a fun bus where they trick it out and it's just the bus is gutted. We're after a natural disaster, like the flooding that we just had in Texas. When that happened, I looked up the area. They had one clinic in that whole area and it took on water. So they had a few days where their clients weren't receiving services. And I just had the vision, like, what if we had a way to go into these areas so that parents with their special needs kids could bring their kid for a few hours. They can be in the sensory bus. They can be with an adult taking care of them while their parent is filling out FEMA paperwork, figuring out where they're going to stay, getting in the food line.
Yeah.
So it's almost like we want it to serve that, where we can deploy it the way FEMA is deployed, the way you see animal shelters deploy buses to get stray dogs. What if we can deploy the RV and we have a team that's there on scene so that parents just have a place for a few hours where they can take their child who's overwhelmed from the situation and know that their child is taken care of for a few hours.
I love that. And you know
While
what?
they're diagnosed.
You can do it. And I could totally see you doing that. I know if that's in God's plan for you, it will happen. Anything's possible when He's got His hand in it. And I just think it's wonderful what you're doing. I love your organization. We've done a couple interviews and I just love your story and everything about it and how God has brought you through that. And that's why we do this. I think it's important to share our stories and just to see what He does. So I really appreciate you being here today, sharing your story. It's incredible getting to know you. So I appreciate your time.
You too. And I appreciate you having me and getting to share the story, because it's really just letting other people know, like, there's support out there. And for us, me and my husband, we have the saying that it's you, me, and God.
Yeah.
And that was just because we didn't have any support. It was always just us. So we
Yeah.
just always knew it was me, him, and God. And then being able to extend and offer that resource to other people, but to show them God in every step of the way. It's just been a pleasure.
Holly, thank you so much for sharing your story. Your vulnerability, your faith, and your obedience are such a gift to all of us. I know there's someone listening today who needs to hear every single word you spoke. So if you're a parent navigating autism, or you know someone who is, please check out Autism Meets Faith. You can find them on Instagram. All of their contact information will be in the show notes, and Holly is always just a message away. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond Beauty with Stephanie, and remember, no matter what you're facing, you are not alone. There's purpose in your pain and healing on the other side of heartbreak. We'll see you next time.